in the field I'm in, we don't have time to wait for inspiration to strike. There are deadlines, there are other teams who rely on what we do. And so we can't always just hope we have the time to find inspiration to come up with good ideas. So I know as an artist, something that I was always taught is to continually write down your ideas, continually think about how you could do things unconventionally, and to not wait until you need an idea to already have something you've been thinking about. Creativity is not just inspiration and talent. That plays a role for sure, but the entire point of the podcast I'm doing is that you can cultivate the skill, and that if there is a struggle or a lack of creativity in your life, where there's an inability to be flexible or to see a unique way to approach a problem, that's something you actually can learn. That's not something that only people who are born that way can own. And I don't think it's always about visual. I think sometimes people hear creativity and they think of visual things like dancing or like drawing and painting or being really good at digital design, for example. But when I talk about creativity, I'm talking about the ability to think unconventionally, the ability to bring solutions and to match together things that don't always match in a way that solves problems. And that can apply to everybody. Well, if we want to make room for imagination, I have a couple of things that I think you can do I have a couple of things I think you can do today to start boosting your ability to imagine. Humans have this incredible capability to foresee and to play in our minds scenarios. That's what kids do, right? They pretend to play out what they see their parents do. And the value in it is that they can experiment, they can test, they can try without having the actual consequences of that test. And that is what play is. It's trying things out without the real risk of losing resources or time or energy. And so it's a powerful thing we can do. And I think if you have anxiety, you do have an imagination, because you're imagining what the worst possible thing could be that could happen to you. And it may be based on past experiences. I know it can be based on maybe things you've seen in the news, and your brain just you're going off. And on the one hand, it's good, because if you're a parent, if you know that choking is a hazard for kids, you're going to cut up their food. And by thinking through that, you've just created a safer environment for your child. So in some ways that's good. I think that it's good to plan ahead and say hey, if we don't budget out, then we're going to run into financial problems. That's a good thing to think about. Where it goes wrong is when we start to believe that the probabilities that we foresee are reality, and we start living as if that will happen, not as if it's a possibility and it's a problem that we can start to come up with a solution to. And that's something I've learned, is that me thinking that something will happen does not equal that it has happened. And what happened to me is that I was reacting, my body was starting to learn to react to the thought of something as if it was reality before it even became reality. And sometimes to the point where I'm building out these storylines that are not based on accurate information. So that's where imagination can go wrong. But I've learned that imagination can also go right. And the way that I'm practicing this is that I'm making room for playful imagination. I'm making room for positive imagination. Positive imagination is what would I do if everything went right? That's a great example. Okay, if everything goes right, what would I do? And imagining it out and thinking. Positive imagination is also what would have to be true for me to reach my goal. That's imagination. That's thinking through your problem and coming up with a solution. Even though all the pieces may not be there, but your ability to think through it may actually lead you closer to your goal. Playful imagination to me is when you are just using your brain to solve problems that really there's no, like, it's when you just, it's like daydreaming almost, and you're coming up with solutions for things that you may never encounter. It's not practical to me, but it's fun, and it's enjoyable, and I think it's a better way to spend your time thinking anyway. Instead of thinking of the worst things possible, why not imagine something fun? So I think sometimes it's what you do when you are staring at the clouds and you're looking for images in there, right? And you're just like, okay, that kind of looks like someone's face or someone's hand saying hi from the sky. That's engaging your imagination, because our brains like to look for patterns and we like to look for recognizable things. So I like to do that with all kinds of things. Like sometimes when I am headed to work, for example, I will imagine that I'm, on a very important assignment from, I don't know, an imaginary queen somewhere. And I will imagine out, okay, what is the assignment I'm doing? And it's just like, what's the point of that? The point of it is that I'm letting my brain exercise. I'm letting it imagine and play. And what happens is I can bring that skill in when I encounter something unexpected in my day, and I can be flexible and I can change with it. Because the truth is, I'm learning to accept the fact that I cannot control everything. I can't. And if my day going well depends on it going as planned, I'm going to have a bad day. But if I can have the ability to be like, okay, this didn't go as planned, how can I pivot? I can be steady in a world that's constantly changing. So I